welcome to Office Hours Stag Radios podcast, where we take a step beyond the lecture theatre and into the lives of the people who shape our experiences. I'm your host, Sofia Varela, and today we are joined by
Dr. Lena Mattheis. Hi.
One of the first things that I wanted to ask you was this thing about the human behind the lecturer. So we want to kind of step away from the titles and the job descriptions and more focus on like who you are as a person. So before the podcast, before the publishing, before the teaching, there's always this one kind of spark that sparked everything in your career. So what was it about your subject that hooked you and convinced you this is what I want to do in my future?
You know, I think that was probably my very good friend Mihao, because I've always been super bookish, and I always felt like books were kind of opening this world to me that I didn't really have access to. But I didn't really have anyone to talk to about books. And to be honest, I was reading questionable selection of books. And my friend Mihao always had the best reading recommendations. He gave me the best books, but he was always also really interested in talking about books and in writing and in kind of being in that creative exchange. And that was just like a whole new world to me. And I feel like now, you know, that's something that I get to do every day, and that I get young people to see young people experience that same kind of enjoyment of literature is really, really, really special.
That's what I find with a lot of literature, is that kids nowadays, unless they're specifically focused on one genre, they're not really interested in books and things like that. And it's kind of a taboo subject, especially in school. I remember having a conversation with my teacher being like, why isn't there more sort of modern literature taught in schools? Why is it just Shakespeare and Charles Dickens and things? And I always spoke to him about that. And that's when I was really interested in coming into university to study about just books and literature and things like that. Speaking of that spark, every single academic, I feel like they kind of have like one project that took over their life. What was that one project for you that started it all up?
So I guess as with most academics, I tend to get really obsessed with my current project. I think that's just often how we do research, right? How I'm sure you've experienced that as well, where once you start reading about something, you discover this whole new world. But I think something that that really kind of changed something for me was starting my podcast Queerlit, where I realized that academia could also be kind of all these other things beyond traditional academic publishing, and could be this exchange that, you know, went kind of beyond the professional and also allowed people to speak about exactly kind of what you're asking me today. What are their passions? What brought them to that thing that they're obsessing about? So I think that style of being in conversation and getting to learn about what really makes people tick, where their thinking comes from, I think that's just a project that's really changed the way I think about my own work and I approach academia in general.
How do you kind of involve your Queerlit podcast into your work though? Like, what is it? What is it for the people at home that don't know what it is? Like, what do you do?
So I initially started Queerlit as a teaching podcast because I was teaching in the pandemic while seminars were entirely online, and that, you know, we were all experiencing Zoom fatigue, and, you know, it was just really hard for lots of people. So I was trying to think of ways in which to create kind of that connection that many of us were lacking. And so what I did on a module that I was teaching on queer and trans literature is that I replaced every other seminar session, every other kind of Zoom session with a podcast episode. That's also because I was teaching a lot of queer theory, and, you know, I love reading theory, but it's hard, right? It's not always very relatable. And I felt that I, you know, had this advantage that often at conferences I got to meet these people, and when they were talking to me about their theories, I was like, oh, that's what you meant, and it suddenly all made sense, and I wanted to like share that experience with my students. So I got a bunch of the theorists that I had on the reading list and asked them to record conversations with me. And so I would meet with the students in one session, and then the next session they would listen to a podcast episode with the author or theorist that we were discussing. And I told them, well, I'm gonna be in the Zoom room just like in case you want to chat about what you heard, but it's not going to be mandatory, and it's just like no structure. And those ended up being, I expected no one to show up, and those ended up being the most amazing sessions of that entire module, because, when the students were just like, they just listened to this, often quite personal conversations where theorists shared what really made them passionate about their subject. And, they just wanted to come and share their own thoughts. And it was a really lovely experience. And ever since, I've been producing the podcast.
I want to go back a bit. So before the papers, before the pressures, before all of that, what was the one thing that kind of like made you click and was like, this is exactly what I want to do? How did you get a passion for this field?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said, I've always been a big reader, and I imagine you have as well. If you're already criticizing your teachers in school, always a good way to start, I think. But I didn't really feel like engaging with literature was like a world that I really had access to. So I got that through some friends. But then I was terrified of going to university. I didn't know anyone who'd even finished school, and nobody in my family had. And so when I first, arrived in like my first lectures, it opened this whole new world for me. And I had a really great mentor at university, Professor Jens Gore, who ended up being my PhD supervisor many years later. And I think just that experience of discovering kind of this new world where everyone was passionate about the same thing that I was passionate about, but then also having a mentor, having someone who did this work tell me that they thought I could do it, I think I needed someone else to tell me. I didn't know, and then it turns out I could. So yeah,
that's amazing. The fact that you became a university lecturer is just completely perfect. All ties in. So you've spoken a lot about the books that kind of inspired you. So what are the books? Like, what recommendations would you give to other students or to other people? Books that kind of inspired you and your journey.
It's a new one every day, depending on when you ask me. But I think that kind of two books that I feel like really changed the way I look at reading, but also the way I look at life, were Undrowned by Alexis Pleen-Gumbs. I think that's actually here behind. Oh yes, we have that here. Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals. That book is just so unusual and inspiring, and it really changed the way I look at my work and at the world. And Alexis Pleen-Gumbs is just amazing. And another book that for me was kind of really transformational was Life Isn't Binary by Meg John Barker. Kind of that allowed me to see how far kind of a non-binary perspective can allow us to look at things differently. But then, also lots and lots of creative writing. So I've just read At Certain Points We Touch by Lauren J. Joseph, which just broke my heart several times and will definitely also be a transformative experience. I could go on.
So the other thing I wanted to ask was, we're obviously living in a time where something like AI is really, really prevalent. How do you think that kind of affects the future of knowledge, or the future of, the discipline, even books?
I think that's a really important but also really, really difficult question, because, of course, we've all been using AI for a really long time, right? So there's lots of little tools that we've gotten used to using that we no longer really think of as AI, such as, spell check or any kind of grammar suggestion. So I think there are a lot of places like that where AI can kind of take away some of the tasks that we didn't really want in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing. But I mean, creative expression exists because it's something that we wanted in the first place, right? So nobody, somebody's probably asked you at some point to spell check your document, but nobody's going to ask you usually to sit down and write a poem. So I feel like that isn't really something that AI can take away, because it's such a human drive, right, for expression. So maybe AI can help us do some of the things we do and some of the writing that we do more efficiently, but that, that thing that makes us get creative and that makes us tell stories, that can't really be replaced, because it's always gonna come out of us in some way, right?
Of course, progress isn't linear. We were talking a lot about this before, and how failure is a huge part of learning, but it's rarely spoken about. I don't feel like a lot of people are open about things that have gone wrong in their life or in their past. So what's an experience or project that didn't work out, but that you felt benefited you in it not working out?
First of all, I think you're so right about that, and thank you for asking about it. I think we're so primed in so many different ways to talk about our successes, but not necessarily acknowledge our failures. And I just want to say that I fail at stuff all the time. Like, the only reason I get anything published is that I write 15 bad versions of it, right? And the only way in which I get funding for a cool project is because I get rejected several times, and that's true for every single thing I've done. I don't think I can think of anything. I don't know if you can, but no. I don't think there's anything that I've done and was just immediately like, yeah, that's great. That's perfect. We're going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important question, and I think there's one project that actually ended up leading me to Quailed, my podcast, which I was just talking about. Because I, again, also kind of in the pandemic, in that time of many consecutive lockdowns and really intense social isolation, I was trying to write a book about space and British poetry. And I mean, I published some of my research for that, but the more time I spent by myself working on this alone without talking to anyone about it, the weirder it became, and just like very highly abstract and theoretical. And some of the stuff that I've published on it, I'm just like, at the time it just felt like, yeah, that all makes sense. And I'm like, oh, that was, I don't know what was going on in my brain, but that kind of made me think, I really kind of need to be in dialogue with people. And especially because I do so much research in the queer and trans community, I also need to be in dialogue with my community in order to get my thinking, to get my writing in a shape that is productive and that's going to be helpful for other people. And that's kind of the other motivator to start Quailed. So it was something that was helpful for my students, but that also ended up being very helpful for me. And I think it was probably a wise idea that I chose to never actually write that book.
You mentioned about your community and speak with them. How did you get involved in your community and finding your people in a way?
Ooh, I don't know, many different ways. So I think both through academia, but also importantly through kind of lots of literary events, readings, community groups, festivals, and also, spaces of community here in Guildford, like Newhouse runs some really excellent creative and queer things. And I've had the pleasure of working with groups like Blossom, which is a really excellent local group. So lots of different areas. And I think that's what, to me, makes those conversations with community so important, that it's not limited to academia, but very much goes out into the creative world and to the activist world as well.
I think that's something really special, especially in literature and writing and things. I think it's important to share our ideas. That's why in our seminars we do a lot of workshops, and I think that is so wonderful. We get to read other people's work and kind of take inspiration from each other. So one of the last questions is, if only we could go back and talk to our younger selves, what would you say to a younger version of yourself, someone who's first starting university, whether you're nervous or scared, or what advice would you give?
I mean, for myself, it would definitely be to be less intimidated. I felt there were so many kind of things that I felt everyone else was like really confident about, and a lot of experiences that were, you know, new to everyone, but where I felt like, oh, but I already kind of need to know what exactly this is, what exactly is expected. And I think that there wasn't really a need to be intimidated. I feel like I could have I ended up really enjoying being a student, but I think I could have done that earlier. I really didn't need to stress all that much about, you know, which citation style an assignment needs. Somebody's going to tell me at some point. It will be fine.
No, I think that's really important. I feel like a lot of people, they're kind of scared, especially going into first year or even second year. I think it's such big jumps going in between all the years, especially going into placement as well. So I know everyone's getting the same boat. Everyone's doing the same thing. Do you feel that the same within the teachers? So when you first came into this job and then kind of figuring out where you fit in?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And especially because I, beforehand I was working in a bunch of different countries, but mostly in Germany. So, you know, coming into UK academia is very different from Germany, definitely. And yes, I definitely had that same experience where, for the first few months, you're just kind of getting a sense of where you are and what you're doing and how everyone else is doing things. So yeah, just as it's, you know, stressful when you're new at university as a student, it's definitely the same when you're a member of staff, that you kind of have to find your way around. But luckily we're a small team and we have lovely students, so that was a really easy thing to get used to. And also a really nice space to be, because beforehand I was teaching at a really, really large university, and I had a great team. I really enjoyed teaching there. But I always had kind of groups of students that was, it was always kind of 50 people minimum in a room, and you don't really get that kind of, the kind of conversations and connections that you have here, and that kind of, I think, made me feel at home more quickly than I expected. So that was really lovely.
It's that same thing that we were saying about community and having the chance to speak to different people. I think that, again, super important. Finally, just to wrap everything up, what is one question that you would give to the next lecturer in the next episode of Office Hours?
I would like to know from my colleague, what is a book you really hate and why?
So thank you guys so much for listening to Office Hours, and thank you, Lena, for joining us this episode. I've been your host, Sofia Varela, and join me next week. Do the follow, do the sharing, do the liking, do all the stuff that you need to do. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye. See. Ooh, that was so cute.